Hi, it's Hokum here, and this is a review of the recently updated M56 Scorpion. This tank is currently available on the EU server. I believe it's also available on the NA server and SEA server as well. This tank was recently updated in the 9.15 patch, and I picked it up as it's now available on the EU server as a special tank of the weekend type of thing. In 9.15, this tank got updated with the following specs. You can see that the dispersion of the guns bloom, and moving those was making the tank about as derpy as ISU 152, so not great. They've also improved its reverse speed. This is quite a major thing, as this tank is pretty hampered by its mobility. This improvement here means that you can come to a ridge, find a target, hopefully not get spotted, fire, and if you do get spotted you can reverse back without being taken out, hopefully. They've also improved the aim time on the tank. 2 seconds is already pretty good. 1.9 seconds is just better, but it's not like taking it up to being amazing or anything like that. It's definitely not down to like the 1.1 seconds of the S35. This is the one here for when the turret is moving, and that's quite a large buff. However, there are still limitations with this, and we'll get into that in my replay. As you can see, this tank destroyer is quite small. Front to back it's actually quite small. Height wise is actually quite tall. Here's an E25 for comparison. You can see that the E25 is much shorter from top to bottom than the M56 Scorpion. The M56 Scorpion's turret is basically almost like it's sat on top of the E25. The length of the chassis is about the same, and the width of the tank, E25, is slightly wider. Things to look at on this tank: the firepower of this gun is one of the assets of this vehicle. With a standard shell damage of 240 and a penetration of the main gun of 219, this tank is pretty okay in the gun department. That's a good 90mm. The rate of fire, however, that's not so good. This tank, although it's basically a large open chassis in which people can load the shells in, and the shells are just here, literally you just pull one of these little slides back, take the whole shell out, and you just ram it into the gunner. The rate of fire is not that great. I mean, let's have a look at this. Rate of fire, 9.1 rounds per minute. Let's compare this to the SU-122-44, which has got 8.8 rounds per minute. Now, yes, that is a slower rate of fire, but when you consider that this gun does 390 damage as opposed to 240, you can see that only marginal difference in rate of fire makes a massive difference in the overall DPM, and that is one of the weak spots of this tank. As you can see here, the overall DPM of this tank is approximately 1900 damage per minute. That's okay, but it's nothing amazing. I mean, this is obviously boostable if you're having brothers in arms, gun rammers and such like, but let's have a quick look at the SU-122-44 versus this, and the E25 as well, actually. Okay, now we can see where this tank is starting to have problems versus other premium tank destroyers of its tier. The DPM of the E25 is already almost 900 damage per minute higher, and the SU-122-44 is simply insanity. It's over 1000. It's like an extra half better again. As I mentioned before, the penetration is good. The damage is actually, it's a 90mm. It's pretty much average for this kind of gun size, and this is the type of gun you have in tier 8 and some tier 9 tanks. Compared to the E25 it's much better, but compared to the SU-12244 it's simply crushed. Module damage is comparable. It's better than the 75 and worse than the 122 again. And here's where you start to see the problems. That there to that there is just simply bonkers. Here's the forward speed. You can see that the tank's not got that high. It's actually got the lowest forward speed of any of these three tanks, but due to its massive power to weight ratio it gets to 45 and pretty much sticks at 45 at almost any surface. Even going up slopes it'll do 45. Obviously not right up the hill on Himmelsdorf or something like that, but it'll keep up there most of the time. The terrain stats are reasonable. It's not the worst terrain stats. I mean, it's strange that the SU again has such great terrain stats, because it's a much larger tank, but it has wider tracks, so maybe it gives away to that. Armour values. Now that's one of the things which is one of the weakest things of this tank. It has no armour. 1mm is about your limit. The tank has also got very low health, and the manoeuvrability of this tank, this is what kills it. This is its major weakness. Turret traverse speed of 12.5 versus, I mean, these are just monstrously higher. This thing has trouble tracking targets which get close. The track traverse as well, 40 degrees per second, is also very, very slow compared to these ones. I mean, this tank just feels sluggish in the turn, and if you're in a turning fight, it is sluggish. Recommended modules on this tank. Gun rammer. Needs to have a gun rammer. This will increase the rate of fire of that gun, which is by default fairly slow. I'd also go for the full sort of like camping bush tactic loadout of binoculars to increase that view range. The view range on this tank is not great, 350, it's 358 because I've got brothers in arms on this crew. And also camouflage net. This tank needs as much camouflage as possible. When there's a discount on camouflage, I'm going to buy some camouflage for this tank because it needs the additional boost to its camouflage value. Skills I'd recommend on this tank: camouflage. This crew don't have camouflage, but they're out my T30, which is a tank so large that camouflage as a skill is pretty much useless on them. I recommend camouflage, brothers in arms, and of course 6th sense on your commander, and then probably camouflage. Okay, here we have a match which I think shows the weakness and also the strength of this tank. Here you can see I'm platooned with Nadaga. He's in the SU-12244. And I'm having a good look around this tank. It's the first time I've seen it in a match. This is my first ever game in this tank. And I'm checking it out from all angles just to give it a good once over. The model on this tank is really, really nicely done. The detail on it is fantastic. Like all the little winding and controls for slewing the gun, and all the little handles for where the rounds are hidden inside. And here you can see the mobility of this tank isn't bad. Its maximum speed is only 45 kilometers per hour, but with that massive power to weight ratio, it just sticks at that speed. On Fisherman's Bay, one of my favourite spots are these bushes here on the 2-3 line. This is like an ideal map for this tank. There's plenty of cover, you can use vision control, and this is one of the few maps in this game where this tank does shine, and I'm really, really lucky to have got this map for the very first map I played in this tank. In 9.15 there's a change, and you can now hear the camouflage net and binocular setup, and due to that it's now maxed out my view range, and I can see this IS. Now here you're seeing one of the limitations of this tank, that it's not that accurate. The accuracy of the gun is American, to put it blankly. It's not bad, it's just not great either. It's not the world's best sniper tank, but it's good enough. As you can see, I'm able to hit the turret and cupola of this IS. I am a little bit high on that one. I was actually hoping my shot would drop slightly. And again, shell goes high. Sat here in this bush, this tank is pretty secure. I've got my binoculars set up. I've got my camo net set up. I can see anything that's getting close to me, and I can see anything that I can shoot at, certainly. These guys here are behind a rock. I feather them just to see if there's any available chinks in there hiding, but no. Our team on this side do a fairly good job. They push up quite well, but I think they actually over push. The Cheeto here suddenly popped out from behind his bushes. I wait for him to be behind the bush before I fire, and you can see that I do the same again here. I wait for him to be behind the bush so he can't spot me before I fire. I just want to make sure that I don't get spotted, because this tank has no armour. Their team has got a pretty good player in the T20, and their RT is also not a bad player. I noticed that the T150 has got into a good position. I kind of risked it there. I kind of positioned myself and knocked these trees down, which is quite bad, but in the process they gave me a disc cover, and I hit the T150 there for a remainder of his health. Here you can see that this rate of fire is just not that amazing. The rate of fire is, on this tank, I think I've got it down to about 6.8 seconds. It's not displaying the reload timer, which is a bit weird. Swing my gun around. See if I can feather the KV-1. No. These guys here shouldn't have kept pushing, and the M7 is now in a big amount of trouble. KV-1, M7, if he plays it well, can easily take out that tank. Here the M7 should retreat back, but he gets taken out by that T20. This tank has got very good camouflage, but its lack of armour and relatively low rate of fire means it's very hard to push in this tank. Now this OI, if I had gone out to try and push on this flank, that OI could have quite easily have shot at me. And the T20 for that matter. And this tank has not got the hit points to take shots, especially from an OI. This tank can be easily one shot. OI, and he's leaving his side open, and I think this shot penetrates as well. Keep a look over there to see if he was visible again, but he's not quite. Penetration. Get a couple of nice shots into this IS. Kind of hard, there's a ridge there, so it's a bit hard to work out where exactly everything is. But the key to this tank is getting to a position where you can sit in the bush and just keep the gun singing. This TOG 2 doesn't stand a chance against this gun. There's no way he's going to bounce virtually any rounds. I track him. There's no intention of tracking, but useful one. Penetration. Enemy armor is destroyed. Now this is where things start going bad. I believe I get the kill on this OI. The IS first. Enemy armor is hit. Notice that T20 behind me. I think it's him which spots me in a little while.
We didn't even scratch them. Got him. Enemy vehicle
There
destroyed.
we go. That's the OI, and that's me spotted by the T20. And I take a big shot from
It's
him.
working, but not very well.
Notice that the first shot that hits me takes my gun out. This tank is very prone to module damage. The M44 shooting at me as well. Now I make a small mistake here. I tried to work out which bush is the best bush to go into. I reason that this one here is actually quite good. Slightly further back, I got a good cover of the cap, but we'll see why it's a mistake in a little while. And also another one of the weaknesses of this tank. So I've retreated back, sat in this bush, got my binoculars and camera net back up. And now, unfortunately, with 7 minutes on the clock, I have to wait for the enemy to come to us. 3,942 damage on the counter at the top there. I was quite happy with that for this tank. And now the waiting ensues. The M44 could easily one-shot this tank, so there's absolutely no point being aggressive. The T34 does a fantastic job here, seeing he's only got such low hit points. He manages to take this T20, which is amazing. It's such a shame that the T34 goes forward here and ends up being taken out. And that's where things start going terrible.
It's working, but not very
Now I managed to, luckily, not get a ram from that Cromwell there. Bring my gun around on him, but you can see this tank is just so slow in the till. He's able to outmaneuver me. I was hoping I might be able to get an extra shot in here, but boom.
We're done for. Everyone get out.
Nothing much more I can do there. 4,189 on the clock. KP3 takes out the T34, and the Cromwell takes out the FV304, I think. Well, you got to see the benefits of this tank. Very good camouflage, reasonable mobility, but you also saw the bad sides with its very, very poor turning and its inability to move its gun fast enough to track close moving targets. And here we see the end of that mission. So I managed to get an ace tanker. I managed to get, I'm fairly happy with that, 4,424 damage, 6 kills, and 1,422 XP in total. I managed to get 5 for a Frank Bruiser, high caliber, and a top gun. The credit making on that for 4,400 damage was not. You can see that I managed to get 93,000 credits plus 8,500 for getting these awards, even though it was a loss. Total outcome is 84,000 credits, which isn't terrible, but 4,423 damage and 409 assistance damage. Total XP from that game, 2,645. I'm rather happy with that. Got the platoon bonus, got the courageous resistance bonus, and for playing in the platoon bonus. But overall you can see the tank's benefits and flaws. It's got a very good gun with good penetration, but not the best rate of fire. It's got a good turn of speed. It can maintain that speed because it's got a good power to weight ratio, but the tank turns slowly, and with the turret turning slowly means that it cannot handle itself in a close-in knife fight against mediums. The Cromwell in that mission there is a well-known good tank. The Cromwell is easily able to maneuver and outmaneuver tanks. It's a known thing. So there we go, the M56 Scorpion. Would I recommend it? Probably not to many players. I like tanks which have got unique features, and the M56 Scorpion is very unique. It's got no armour, it's very much a bush sniping tank. There's lots of other tanks you can bush snipe in it, but this one's designed for it. Unfortunately, with the change in the meta on a lot of maps, Fisherman's Bay is one of the few maps that is pretty much perfect for this tank. There's a lot of bushes you can hide in, there's a lot of areas you can make comfortable just by knocking down trees. And yeah, unfortunately it's a tank which has been largely outmoded by the changes of designs on a lot of the maps. So a lot of maps are less open, there's less sniping positions, and there's less cover, which means overall on this tank I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it's horses for courses really. It's not that expensive, but you can probably get better tanks for less. Okay, that's Hokum signing out. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy my review.